I'm sorry.
Oh, you thought I was the minister?
Mayor.
Okay, one of the things that we try to look at as part of the task force revision of FMJS is to look at the revision possibility of Florida State Statute 95123. We talked about giving the committee a little bit more oversight as far as the inspection process and actually the assignment of inspectors. When I talked to our legislative person over at FSA, that bill was not filed. So probably won't happen this year, but that's something we're going to probably have to work on in conversation with the sheriff, how we want to proceed for oversight on the inspection process, and David probably elaborate a little bit more on this. As it sits currently now under our system, the Florida Sheriff's Association and the committee are two separate entities. Neither one has the regulatory or statutory enforcement of doing jail inspection or going inside of jails and mandating that we do certain things as far as jails are concerned. Throughout the years, a lot of requests I get, Sheriff Rutherford gets, that David entertains, well, why don't you guys do this and why don't you guys do that? The statute doesn't allow it. It does not allow us to do unannounced inspection. It does not allow for me to show up on somebody's doorstep and say, Sheriff Borders, I need to come into your jail and I got to inspect and you have to let me in. Statute doesn't allow that. What it does allow, if you look at FMJS, the way the standards are set up, should our facility be safe, humane? Absolutely. Are we going to experience times of overcrowding in our jails? Absolutely. That's the nature of what we do. But do we ensure that inmates are protected or free from harm? Do we make sure that they get, adequate programming and recreation, and they get nutritional meals? Those are things constitutionally we are mandated to do. As far as what the sheriff does in working with his peers and other sheriffs in the county, is that, we have the cooperation out of the jail administrators. Do you have an issue? If I get a complaint, what I'll do, I'll send it to the jail administrator. Hey, look into this. Here's the person's phone number. Give them a call. But does it mean I could go in and say, you got to do this and you got to do that? I don't have the authority to do that. So those are some of the things we're kind of looking at, and just to go into what I'm doing as far as the task force. We talked about a lot, and some of the task force members are here. We talked about, revision of FMJS to make sure we get rid of the redundancy that are in the statute. But there are some redundant things that are in there. There are some things that are in FMJS that was a holdover from the old Florida Administrative Code 32-8 that were good, but some things we're not a prison. We're not a prison. Okay, we have pretrial detainees and we have to treat them as such. We do have people that are convicted, but we're not 33-8 anymore. We're FMJS, so we're trying to look at that, revise that so it's a standalone process. What we did at the last meeting with the membership, we broke down the various chapters so the individual teams or the groups of teams can start looking at these standards and saying, hey, what do we do to fix this within the current system? Can we strengthen what we have? Now, a lot of times when I talk to Sheriff Rutherford, you're the committee chair. You can do within reason. And sometimes Sheriff Rutherford and I don't agree a lot, but he knows his business. He knows jail, which is great. So, it kind of helps when we sit down and talk. What can we do to make FMJS better? I think that's what we're trying to do on the task force. Any task force members had it wondered? You had any comments, Ruben? You had any comments about how the task force goes? We try to work with our partners. Those that, FCAC, if some things change on our side, they have to change on their side. So we're trying to look at it and trying to add some teeth to it within reason. I think the last meeting I went to, or one of the Central Florida groups, if we have some oversight that is being, that we get rid of the peer groups. I don't think we need to really do that because we can work within the current system that we already have. But as David probably can elaborate, a lot of those reports that you look at, you've got a lot of work. It's a big task to try to put our hands around this process. And it's a work in progress. FMJS is a work in progress. Is it a perfect system? No, absolutely not. But we have dedicated people on the task force and those administrators and those partners we work with and those professionals that go out and do the inspection. They do the best job they can. So, that's how I do.
Thank you,
I have a
Isaiah.
question.
Yes, Don?
This, if this is a recommendation for changes, these underlying areas, it does not mention medical at all. I think maybe medical, because to read this, it looks like possibly you only have to have the jail inspection, or medical inspection is not required. So you might consider that when you're looking at changing.
We talked about that, and when I talked to Christine and Annie, and I'd assume a year ago, they did their own revision and process. We're going to incorporate medical into whatever we do, so medical's not going to be left alone. One of the things that we talked about under the current, or the prior chair, there were some jails because of size and 24-hour coverage. Medical was done a little differently. We talked about, we still need to look at those areas. We still need to, as Donna inspect a lot of the small jails in the Panhandle. We still need to look at those processes. One of the things that I talked with former Sheriff Harvey, who started the risk management fund, his issue is, you know, we do inspections. We cite serious or notable violations. They send everything into the chair. But we do no follow-up. Well, the statute, nor does FMJS says we have to do that. Should we be doing it? We should get either a visit or something in writing. I really think that's where we're lacking, but then that takes manpower. That takes people to do that. And a lot of times, you know, I tap the sheriffs for their assistance, and they've been gracious enough to have their staff go out. I know Chief Wiles is great, or Director Wiles, to call him Chief. But Director, anytime I need her people. But they have jobs to do, and I have to be conscious of that. But I think we have a responsibility from the committee and from my end to provide that follow-up. To provide that. When I talk to the families, and the families are very concerned about their relatives that are in jail, rightfully so. I mean, rightfully so. And I think we have a duty and a responsibility. I take directions from the chair. My job is to give them advice and to, you know, if the chair needs me to do it, I have no problem doing that. But that takes manpower to do that. So kind of be conscious and aware that, you know, when I ask, it's not because Isaiah is lazy, he don't want to do it. I need help. I definitely need help.
Listen, I would respond to that question specifically about medical. I believe it is included in this because Florida model jail standards, if you look at the definition of that, are minimum standards created by Florida Model Jail Standards Committee. Those medical standards are standards that we create to ensure the constitutional rights of those incarcerated are upheld. So I would say that medical is included in that. So the real need for change that I see here is when we have sheriffs or others who don't schedule their inspections with peer groups to come in and do their inspection, and it's simply an omission. There's no affirmative denial of an inspection. What I'd like to see is set up, and what this will do, Florida Model Jail Standards will now schedule that sheriff's inspection. Now, he can still keep us out of his facility. We won't have the authority to barge in, obviously, but he's going to have to make an affirmative decision not to allow us to go in and inspect that jail. I think that puts him in a whole different light from a civil standpoint. And I think we need to move away from the peer team concept if we're going to do it, if it's going to be an ordered inspection as opposed to, a personal decision on when to be inspected. And so that's why I think the task force came up with these recommendations. Anybody?
What are the consequences?
Well, the consequences.
They say, no, I'm not going to. They take that affirmative.
Well, the consequences remain unchanged, and the consequences are circuit court. That's always, that will remain the only option for someone who feels that their constitutional rights are being violated during incarceration. Their relief is in the courts. It's still not with us.
I got one little question.
Sure.
Something that Mr. Dennard said. It's been a while since I've dealt with jail standards, but I've dealt with both 33-8 and Florida Model Jail Standards. If I recall, maybe you can correct me, 33-8 is part of Chapter 33. Chapter 33 in Florida statute deals with inspection of prisons. Dash 8 in the particular, when it was in effect, dealt with particular inspections by the state prison inspector of county jails. So when you state we're not a prison, 33-8, when it was enforced, wasn't about inspecting prisons, it was about inspecting county jails. Am I correct on that?
Yes, I believe you are.
Yes. Okay, I just want to get that clarified.
Yeah.
You know,
That's,
back in the, probably the early 90s, I think it was, those of us that was in the business, and, you know, prison inspectors, as you probably remember, would show up on your door, I'm here to inspect. We all went through that system. And I think the petition was made by the sheriffs. We can police our own. Thus came, you know, we break away from that, and we establish and adopt our own standards. When we first migrated over, FMJS was identical with old 33. All the language, everything was exactly the same. The enforceability didn't migrate over. Where the prison inspectors could do, actually, you know, when I worked, could they close you? Yeah, they could. I mean, they had the authority to do that. Now, I didn't see that. I don't know what the Sheriff Rutherford knew in his history, if it ever happened that they did it. I don't know, but that authority was there. You know, it would make a report to the secretary, those type of things. The decision to not to do that, I can't answer when that decision was made. So when Sheriff Rutherford took over, and when Sheriff Dean was in charge, I mean, it has been a struggle. You know, it's not an easy struggle when sheriffs are dealing with peers. It's not an easy struggle. It's not an easy struggle when some jails are run by county entities. You got to deal with county entities too. So when I go into a county jail, as opposed to going to a sheriff, you have to walk a little softly. I have no enforceability, but they work with, and I've known a lot of them for such a long time. It is easy for me and Sheriff Roseberry and Sheriff Borders, who were jail administrators. They know the process. They know the process. So, I mean, we're trying.
yeah, let me say this about the, you know, I think